Welcome to the Quadratics podcast series QPod. We focus on the wonderful and rapidly changing world of data science, big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and intelligent automation. The QPod series is aimed at provoking thought and providing insights, especially to senior decision makers and practicing data scientists. In this QPod episode, we focus on chatbots. From advanced IVR systems to Alexa and OK Google, we humans now conduct different levels of communication with bots daily. For a technologist, Siri or Watson cognitive bots bring together scores of smart algorithms and decades of research. For a business owner, chatbots mean substantial cost savings, standardization of communication, and the ability to leverage knowledge hidden in conversations. Whether you're a techie or you live in a cave like me, if you've had to ask or type questions when ordering groceries, doing banking, booking a flight, train or hotel, you are sure to have had a brush with a chatbot. Despite their attraction and popularity, when I look at a conversation with a chatbot, I can't help thinking how dull and dumb it is. It does not take even a small child long to realize that today's state-of-the-art chatbots like Siri are way behind humans in terms of their common sense, ability to hold an interesting and useful conversation, and in handling the unexpected. This makes me wonder whether chatbots will continue to stay dumb like IVR systems. To help us make better sense of the chatbot world, we have with us today Dr. Sri Ramamurthy, a big data rock star who has been called one of India's 10 most prominent analytical academicians. Dr. Murthy has clocked over 25 years in AI research and development and has many patents and papers. Welcome, Dr. Murthy. Thank you for taking out some time to have a chat with us about chatbots.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let me clarify upfront that this QPod is not meant to teach the algorithms or technical and engineering aspects of chatbots. There are a lot of online researches to learn these. Very briefly though, chatbots, as I understand them, are computer programs that have conversations with humans either through speech or through typed text. Dr. Murthy, could you start by throwing some light on some conventional and some unconventional ways we could use chatbots?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Preeti. Chatbots, you had mentioned, use speech and text-based chat. These need not be the only ways in which you interact with a chatbot. We are evolving to a place where chatbots can also understand gestures. They can show you images in response to the conversation you're having or useful to the conversation you're having. Chatbots then become kiosks that you can speak with. They can also evolve into humanoid robots that have movement, autonomous navigation, and that can show you a feedback, not only in terms of words, spoken word or written word, but also in terms of hand movements, facial expressions, etc. So what we are looking at here in chatbot technology is the beginning of truly conversational entities. And to come to the applications, conventional and unconventional applications of chatbots, you're right that in terms of common sense, a chatbot may be far behind a 7-year-old. But we are not trying to recreate 7-year-olds. We are trying to create systems that will be practically useful to us, whether it is in customer service, whether it is in information gathering, whether it is in helping people where it's difficult to place other people for cost or for practicality considerations. So a good way to understand the state of the art and the promise of chatbot technology will be to look at it from practical utility rather than similarity to humans.
So, Dr. Murthy, you are talking about chatbots and you're calling them conversational entities, and you've partially answered my next question. Do we want our chatbots to be intelligent or merely useful? Are they expected to replace human-computer interaction entirely at some point?
In order to be useful, they need to be intelligent. So I don't see useful and intelligent as two different things. Do they need to be emulating or imitating human behavior? Or should they just be useful? I think that's an interesting question. Eventually, there is a small demand for systems that are artificial but behave like human beings, especially in areas like counseling, customer service. They need to understand the nuances of human communication and react accordingly. But in other contexts, let's say I'm making a phone call to find out the limitation of insurance reimbursement that I have for a certain symptom, certain procedure. I really don't need emotion there. I just need the information. I want to be able to express in my natural way, which may be unique, which the chatbot has never heard that particular formulation of the sentence before, but it can intelligently figure out what I said and get me the information that is required. So we do require intelligence in terms of understanding natural language, in terms of understanding nuances of communication, but we do not require it to be human-like. And do I see the entire communication between humans and computers being replaced by chatbots in the future? That's a very interesting thought. I think that certainly human-computer interfaces will get close to the way that humans like to communicate rather than the way that computers like to communicate. We used to be doing exactly what the computers wanted through cards, through typing text. Then we moved to full screen interfaces, mouse-based interfaces, touch-based interfaces from typing, and now we are moving towards visual interfaces, speech-based interfaces, etc. And we want gestures, maybe we want tactile communication, which is more than just touch screen. When you touch the screen in a certain way, it knows that you are in an urgency. Whereas if you touch it in a regular way, it knows that it can communicate, it can prioritize differently. So I do think that human-computer interaction will move more towards how humans like to communicate. In that sense, yes, different applications will move towards chatbot-like interfaces. But this is not going to rule out the presence of existing types of communication. If you see a complex communication context like cockpit of an aeroplane, in that the inputs that are being given to the pilot are visual, or tactical, or auditory, a combination of all the signals, because we want to optimize the attention that they need to pay to the panel to understand every signal and then to react to it. And so it is the requirement that would determine how we design the interfaces, and in that speech and text will play a substantial role.
Dr. Murthy, you mentioned the gap between, human communication and computer communication and making that gap smaller, but the natural language of humans is not the inherent language of machines. How are chatbots expected to handle the ambiguity in human conversations? A single sentence can be delivered in so many ways, with variations in slang, accents, interruptions, colloquial substitutes. Even the human brain finds these challenging at times.
Absolutely. And that is the area where chatbot technology, natural language processing technology, text analysis or speech analysis technology has been focusing on. Use very large repositories of information, whether it is spoken text or spoken content or written content. Utilize those large repositories to understand nuances, understand colloquialisms, understand variations of expression, local and regional variations of expression, understand accent by looking at, so if we observe 1 million ways of uttering the word bread, uttering the word school, it's possible that we can train a model that can accommodate all of those variations and detect whichever way school is said or bread is said. So there is a basis of chatbot technology which is reliable recognition of what is said or what is written. And then the second part of the technology is use that information of what is said or what is written to respond intelligently. Collect information from required data sources to respond intelligently to a query. So I think the first part of it, which is reliably understand what has been said or spoken, said or written, we need enormous repositories of information. So only a few companies in the world today, like Microsoft or an IBM or a Google or an Amazon and others, have access to enormous repositories like these. And there may be companies which have access to very large repositories in a particular domain, let's say healthcare related conversations or supply chain related conversations or finance related conversations. Using these large repositories and using machine learning models, we build systems that can understand what has been said or what has been written. And then on top of that, we build systems that can retrieve the necessary information and present it in a useful way.
Dr. Murthy, you were talking about training a chatbot. For us non-techie people, can you give us some idea on what you mean when you say you're training a chatbot?
We actually do not train the chatbot. We train the speech recognition or the natural language recognition technology which is underlying the chatbot. So today you might be building a chatbot on a technology named Cortana, which comes from Microsoft. You may be building it on technology named Dialogflow, which comes from Google. When I say training, I was talking about the training that happens on Dialogflow or Cortana, which need to be trained on hundreds of thousands or millions of samples to reach the kind of recognition accuracy that those engines have. Once they have that, then that technology is exposed by the respective companies to a larger developer base who can then utilize the technology to build chatbots on it. So 95% of the chatbot makers today do not train the chatbots. They only implement the functionality on the chatbot, but all that technology comes from a small number of companies which need to go through enormous amount of training. Another interesting type of training that comes in is correcting the recognition accuracy for specific domains. What I mean is Google may have trained Dialogflow on large repository of general text. It may not have trained it on text that is specific to the aviation sector or the healthcare sector or the financial sector, etc. So we at Quadratix have come up with deep learning and other techniques by which we can take recognition systems designed by third-party companies like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, etc., and refine them or calibrate them to a new domain by training on repositories of text from that domain.
We were talking about the variations in slang and accents, but that is one part of a conversation. The other part of a conversation are the emotions. How important are emotions to chatbots? Are chatbots expected to detect anger or sarcasm? If I'm not mistaken, the current strategy of chatbots is to understand intent through combination of keywords. Will this suffice going forward, or should chatbots be able to detect subtle changes in tone and volume, which are so important for emotions?
No, emotion is absolutely important for human beings. Hence, it should be important for any system that deals with human beings. There are chatbots, speech recognition systems, and natural language processing systems that do detect some amount of emotion today. So there are chatbots that will come back to you and say that you seem upset because you have raised your voice, or because you have lowered your voice, or because you have slowed down your speech, or you have made your speech faster. From speech signals like that, they infer that you may be upset. And something like identifying when somebody is very angry and hence raise their voice is simpler. There are many systems that do that. But subtle emotions are harder to catch. Sarcasm is very hard to catch. It's not just audio signal, but the content that needs to be interpreted to understand that there is sarcasm. If one is bubbly and one says something with a lot of happiness or joy, even then it'll be good to be able to detect it. So yes, chatbots of the future must be able to handle emotion. There are certain systems that already do that for limited emotions today, but it's an active area of work both for companies and academic institutions to improve that capability.
It is obviously cheaper to have chatbots as the first line of responders in a call center. But imagine a customer who is already upset with your product and is met with an emotional entity that provides dull information in a mechanized manner. It can lead to a CRM disaster. Is the chatbot community working on smart routing systems to switch calls suitably to a bot or an expert human? What mix of human and machines do you foresee in future call centers?
That's an excellent question. Absolutely, it is important to be able to relate to the current context and emotion of the person that is calling in a call center, not just to the intent of the current question. And there is work happening on this. For example, escalation. What is the right place or right entity to escalate it to? This is an area that has been of a lot of interest to us. In cases where the answer is unknown or answer cannot be found by the chatbot, or the chatbot's confidence on the answer is low, it should at least show multiple responses. So it may be saying something, but there is a visual interface on which multiple other options are provided. In cases where the confidence on all the answers is low, then the chatbot should politely request the person to wait on the line and escalate the call onto a human. The ratio of human versus chatbots sort of follows the 20-80 rule. 80% of queries that come into call centers are routine, have simpler answers, have been faced before, and it's possible to have chatbots to answer it. Whereas 20% or less of the calls are unique, they have not been seen before and require an intelligent conversation between two human beings or require handling of an emotion. So those cases, instead of attempting to stretch chatbot technology to address those needs right away, it will be cheaper if we use a mix of chatbot and human. So, and that ratio is 80-20, like I said.
How important is it that a chatbot has a body or at least an expressive face? Anyone in customer service knows that the touch and feel of things can be keen for customer delight. Do you see humanoid bots being used dominantly in face-to-face service in future, or will bodiless kiosks do the job equally well?
Like we discussed earlier, there are certain cases where presence is important. For example, I walk into an airport and I want to find out some details about my ticket. It might be helpful, especially in problematic contexts, to have a humanoid. So in future, I see this as a 3-layered implementation. The first layer will be bodiless chatbots, which could be a phone call you're making to a machine or a kiosk that is answering your questions. The second layer is a bodied chatbot, but it's still automated. It's equivalent to a Sophia or other humanoid robots that we are seeing. They're more expensive than the bodiless. They are more limited than the bodiless because they can only serve a few people, whereas a automated phone call based chatbot can scale really well compared to a humanoid robot. So the second layer is that, which will be to answer a small part of more complex questions that require an interaction with a living, moving entity. And the third layer will be human escalation, which will be even smaller number of questions and even more expensive per question to handle compared to the first 2 layers. So I see a 3-layer architecture coming in, but today I think it is perfectly fine to handle a large part of chatbot queries with bodiless chatbots because there are many contexts where we care about the information, care about getting the right and accurate information, and really don't need it to come from something that looks like a human.
In our discussion so far, I think unconsciously we've assumed that the conversation is happening in English. But in places like India, Colombia, or the Middle East even, where the native language usage far outweighs English usage, is chatbot technology ready now? Or is most exciting existing technology mature only for English still?
No, I think most of the practitioners are not assuming that it's English. Advanced natural language processing or speech processing exists for English not as much for other languages, but chatbot makers do know that they need to support other languages. For example, Indian government, we are working with the Indian government to see multilingual chatbots for providing different types of mobile-based services. In countries like the Middle East and Colombia and Southeast Asia, there are different languages that need to be supported for sales systems, either outbound or inbound call centers that utilize chatbots. So these are ongoing technologies. It's important to note that you need not have full-fledged language understanding capability to build a useful chatbot. You can do substantial number of useful applications just at the keyword level. So whether it is information retrieval, whether it is simple question answering, whether it is escalation, all of those can be done just by simple word recognition. So you do not need to have complex programs, complex natural language processing to implement useful chatbots. I think that's a misconception.
It has been great to see all the developments that have happened with chatbots and the amazing things they hold for us in the future. But there have been a few instances in the past when chatbot interactions took very unpredictable turns. In early 2016, Microsoft launched a chatbot Tay with a Twitter handle enabled. In a mere 16 hours, it was shut off. The chatbot had managed to send out 96,000 tweets, many of which had racist and sexually charged content. Tay started mimicking the deliberate, offensive behavior of other Twitter users. What safeguarding mechanisms today ensure that there are no more Tay-like instances?
Tay was certainly a big lesson for the chatbot industry, chatbot makers. And I think that similar incidences of a different nature, but unexpected incidences, can happen in the future. This is true for any machine or any automated mechanism that you're building. I think that the industry now knows that you cannot learn from human behavior. So chatbots, as I mentioned to you before, the learning is in the underlying layers of language recognition, but the conversational behavior is not learnt. Conversational behavior is programmed. You understand the intent and you come back with the right response. But if in the conversation you start learning from your environment, then your environment has power over you, because they can present to you with examples that will mislead the models that the chatbot has of the world. So I think one thing that we have seen after 2016 is lessening of learning chatbots. A lot of chatbots now are just, information serving systems. They don't learn on the fly, and humans control what they learn. So even if there is a repository of information that they are building through their interactions, a human goes through that repository before authorizing that the chatbot can actually learn from these, let's say, conversations that have gone wrong. So I think that is one measure that most chatbot makers have done after 2016. And the other measures, are applicable to chatbots like they are applicable to other AI systems. Bias is something that most AI systems need to deal with, and so do chatbots. The pace of learning, the consistency of response. See, learning can change your response. Consistency is important. So how do you balance consistency with adaptivity is something that AI systems in general and chatbots in particular have to figure out. And these are issues that research groups like those in Quadratics are very, very interested in and are working on. And these are always a work in progress for any technology. There is, these are self-impacting systems. You design a certain type of chatbots, the communication that humans do with it will change according to what you have designed, and that will in turn change the design of the chatbots. So this is an ongoing cycle of learning.
Many businesses today, across verticals and horizontals, are investing time and money to develop user-friendly applications or mobile apps for their customers. To stay future-ready, how important is the interaction of chatbot functionality into each application or app? Is chatbot functionality central to application development?
Yes, I believe capability to interact in speech is central to user interface design or user experience design. I believe that every user interface and user experience professional needs to know the capabilities that exist today in terms of visual interfaces, auditory interfaces, speech interfaces, tactile interfaces, etc. And when they're designing front ends for their applications, they need to ensure that they take all of these capabilities and design an integrated interface. I don't see applications of the future being or using only one channel of communication. I think multi-channel communication, multi-channel interfaces are critical going forward. So we need to have software developers, user interface designers, user experience developers, solution architects being familiar with technologies of speech and other speech and text interfaces.
Lastly, Dr. Murthy, how is the chatbot ecosystem looking as it evolves? For a business that is considering onboarding a chatbot, should they look at a handful of giant companies that have homegrown speech-to-text or text-to-speech and NLP technologies? Or is there good space for smaller companies, individual entrepreneurs to play here?
I think there are multiple layers in the chatbot ecosystem. There are companies that have access to large speech and text repositories, which should build speech to text, text to speech, natural language processing systems. There are companies that have skills in designing humanoid, kiosk, and other systems, and they will be focusing on that. There are companies that have skill sets in particular domains. They need to design newer applications of the chatbot technology. And then there are companies that have AI and machine learning capabilities that need to make chatbots more and more intelligent. So if a company is trying to onboard a new chatbot, I believe that they can work with multiple companies depending on their requirement. If they are looking at bodiless chatbots, then there are entities that specialize in using third-party technology, rapidly put together chatbot applications. They should be working with them. If they're looking for bodied chatbots, whether it is kiosks that can move around or humanoid robots, then they need to work with both chatbot providers and the equipment providers. Then there are companies that need multilingual systems, which will be an integration of chatbot technology with offerings in that particular language, which may come from other providers. So I think there's a whole ecosystem of players here that comes into play. It's not a handful of companies.
From all that I've heard today, I think Marvel will need to come up with a new fiction, because Jarvis looks like a very real possibility. We may in fact be having interactions with versions of Sophia not very far in the future. It has been an insightful and very lively session, and I'd like to thank Dr. Murthy for that. Please watch this space for more discussions and interesting Q-Pods.
Thank you very much.